Good morning. Hope everyone had a good weekend, and I hope that we can start putting together some of the things about the play itself rather than committing philosophy without a license, although sometimes I can't help myself. As usual, let's just take a look at what's coming up. We're wrapping up Measure for Measure on the 26th. That's a week from today. Alfonso will present. We have the quiz, and then we start Henry IV. Paper 3 is due on the 30th. It's over both of the comedies, so you should be thinking about how you can work in Measure for Measure and tie it into Twelfth Night and start making this, some similar observations about everything. And speaking of similar observations, the deceased equine will be repeatedly abused during this presentation because, yes, I'm going to talk about character, I'm going to talk about conflict, I'm going to talk about connection, I'm going to talk about theme, and we're going to try to work this and tie it into some of the other things we have talked about as we have gone through and made this a survey class. Character. Who's Angelo? So we talk about the fact that Vicentio has said Angelo is going to be in charge. He is going to be lent the power to possess terror and frighten the evildoers, to love the people that need to be loved. He's gotten the love of the people in the court. And when you ask the question, what do you think of it? Aeschylus says, if any in Vienna be worth to undergo such ample grace and honor, it is Lord Angelo. He has the ability, he is worthy of being Deputy Duke, taking over the kingdom, taking over when when the Duke is gone. He is worthy of being in charge. Vicentio again says, there is a kind of character in thy life that to the observer doth thy history fully unfold. In other words, he is saying to Angelo, we know you're a great guy. Angelo, we know that you're able to take charge. Angelo, we know that you are nearly perfect. And it's because that heaven doth with us as we with torches do, not light them for themselves, for if our virtues did not go forth of us, 'twere all alike, as if we had them not. In other words, look, your virtues are lit by heaven, your virtues are lit by God. We know that you're a virtuous guy. It shines just like a torch in the night shines. Angelo doesn't seem so sure. Sorry for slurring there. Let there be some more test made of my mettle. Let's make sure I'm ready for this. So while everybody else seems sure, everybody else is positive that Angelo's able to be in charge, he is not. We also get this idea that he is a cold-blooded person. A man whose blood is very snow broth, one who never feels, but doth rebate and blunt his natural edge with profits of the mind, study, and fast. He's a guy who fasts and studies and uses all of his rational senses to put off the want and stings of emotions. He's a great guy. He's a rational guy. He doesn't get moved by his emotions at all. And yet, the tempter or the tempted who sins most? What dost thou, or what art thou, Angelo? And to sin in loving virtue, never could the strumpet with her double vigor, art and nature once stir my temper, but this virtuous maid subdues me quite. So, in other words, the people who say he feels no emotions, the people who say he can't be tempted, Angelo is having these questions about, why am I being tempted? So we have the Angelo who knows himself, and we have the Angelo that everybody else knows. And one thing doesn't seem to be like the other. Start with the connection. We've already had the quotes and the conversation between Vicentio and Aeschylus. And it reminded me, for whatever reason, of the prince from Romeo and Juliet. At the end of Romeo and Juliet, Friar Lawrence has married Romeo and Juliet, concocted the plan where Juliet fakes her death, and then Romeo will be brought back into the city, and is now standing in the midst of a pile of bodies. Paris has been killed, Romeo is dead, Juliet is dead, and the prince says, "We still have known thee for a holy man." It does strike me that in Shakespeare's plays, a lot of times the rulers don't seem to know the people they're dealing with very well, or seem to overlook things that we in the audience might consider important, like you had a whole crap ton of plans and they failed. So when we're looking at this, it's important to remember we don't always know everybody. To go at the line versus line level, there's a kind of character in thy life that to the observer doth thy history fully unfold. Remember in Macbeth, we had this contradiction. In Macbeth, we had the character, Duncan say, there's no art to find the mind's construction in the face. In other words, people can lie to you. People's faces don't fully reveal. Their character can't be fully revealed. The Thane of Cawdor was somebody that Duncan trusted, and the Thane of Cawdor betrayed him. Macbeth is somebody that Duncan trusts. Macbeth will betray him. At the same time, Lady Macbeth is telling Macbeth that people can read his face, so suck it up and hide it. All right? Get the poker face ready. Hide it. And so this tension about, can we fully read people? Can we fully know people? Has been in Shakespeare's plays that we've read in class, and it seems to me to be a question here that we're going to have to deal with Angelo. Is he the Angelo that is revealing himself to us through his internal thoughts, or is he the Angelo that everybody else sees? Can other people figure out who Angelo is, or is he revealing himself only to himself and hiding what he is to everybody else? We again have some connections here. Is Angelo really the stone cold person that everybody says he is? Or is he more or less the person that we're going to deal with as a person who we're going to read and not quite get correct? And I think that this too is a part of the game that we're going to have to look at. I jumped ahead in the slide. I apologize. The question, what dost thou, or what art thou, Angelo, is a question that we have had read several times. Lear asks the question, what art thou? And the Earl of Kent gives him an answer. And then, what dost thou profess? What wouldst thou with us? Is the follow-up question. But it begins with, what art thou? And Lear asks that question several times. What art thou? A very honest, kind-hearted fellow. Edmund asks, what art thou? And Edgar gives him these answers. And, I am no less in blood than thou art. All right? And so the what art thou becomes, I think, a big question when people ask it of others. And please remember that both people that had the question asked to them were in disguise. And so there's a certain irony about a very honest hearted fellow when he's disguised. Okay. And again, we've got this idea the gods are just, and of our pleasant vices make instruments to scourge us. What art thou? As I'm somebody who's reminding you of this, of reminding you of justice. But we've also asked the question about what are you? Or what are these when it's the witches in Macbeth? And for a play we haven't read in class, but a play that a lot of you have said you've read, Horatio asks the question to the ghost of Hamlet's father, what art thou that usurpest this time of night together with that fair and warlike form in which the majesty of buried Denmark did sometimes march? By heaven, I charge thee, speak. Angelo is asking himself a question that gets asked to people in disguises, that gets asked to witches who are the embodiment of evil, and gets asked of supernatural forms that are haunting the midnight hour at Elsinore. And I think it's important to think about this, that in a lot of ways, he is asking a spiritual question. And it's a serious question, even if this plays a comedy. And again, I'll have to remind you that this is a problem comedy. So this is an important question in the solving the problem here. And there's some more questions. Angelo's line about the tempter or the tempted. Who sins most? King Lear. I'm a man more sinned against than sinning. I am more, I have not sinned the most. I have been sinned against more. But it's a question of where am I in this world? Who sins the most? Who's caused this problem to happen to me? Cassius says the fault is not in our stars, but in ourselves. It's not somebody else, it's my fault. So when Angelo is asking, is it her fault? Or is it my fault that I'm sinning? There are different answers. Lear gave one answer, Cassius gives another. Macbeth is dealing with the same question. I am tempted, and it is the horrid image that doth unfix my hair and make my seated heart knock my ribs against the use of nature. I have this horrible imagining, this murder that's yet fantastical. I am tempted. But is it an unnatural tempting that's doing the sin? Or is it Macbeth himself who's doing the sin? Is Angelo's temptation the result of, she's just walking in? Or is Angelo's temptation the fact that he knows himself better than others? And he knows that this is the sort of temptation he can fall into, and that's why he's fasting, and that's why he is trying to cut off all emotions. So these connections should lead us full circle back to character. And yes, there's another question, or another connection. We see that the woman is a saint. We see that the most temptation that doth goad us on to sin in loving virtue. She is a virtuous woman, and a strumpet could not tempt me as much as this virtuous maid, as much as this saint who's been dangled in front of me like a hook. So the woman is either strumpet or saint, virtuous maid or hooker. And we've seen this before. Dwell I but in the suburbs of your good pleasure. If it be no more, Portia is Brutus's harlot, not his wife. In Othello we have Be sure thou prove my wife a whore, my love a whore, excuse me. She's either virtuous wife or she's whore. And once he makes that decision, she must die or else she'll betray more men. We have no choice once Othello gets to the key point, right? We have no choice. It's been proven. We'll go from there. But he only gives two options: whore or wife, harlot or wife, saint or strumpet. But I do think that when we think about this, just like when we think about Angelo and Friar Lawrence, when we see women as saints or harlots, what should readers make of this connection in light of Brutus and Othello? We, I think, have to remember that this is a comedy, not a tragedy, so there might be other things to think about, but we should start anticipating what's going to happen based on what we have read with all of Shakespeare's other plays. And then finally, I think, when we're going to talk about theme, please remember that how the play resolves the questions such as, who am I? Am I more sinned against than sinning? Can I be tempted by the kingdom? Can I be tempted by power? Can I be tempted by the will to retire? Can I be tempted by this woman? How we have those questions answered is going to help develop the theme. Haven't done a daily writing in a while, so I think I want to do one. Make a connection between Measure for Measure and anything else. That connection doesn't have to be one of Shakespeare's plays. I'd like it if you tried, but it doesn't have to be one of Shakespeare's plays. Just try to make a connection with Measure for Measure and anything else. We'll pick this up again with deeper into the play on Wednesday. I hope everybody has a good Monday, and we'll go from there.